Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Looking very pale today with the background and my shirt. I would like to start off by saying that I don't feel great about this shirt choice, but it's what we have on today. So, a first impressions video on the LORAC Pro Palette, the Fairytale Forest. So, I saw, first of all, I used my Shoppers points, Pharmaprix points to buy this palette. If you don't know, if you're not Canadian, Shoppers is like, I don't know, like CVS or Walgreens, and they have like a point system. Anyway, and you can redeem your points for like money off or whatever. I've accumulated my points over many a year, and I was going to redeem them actually for an Urban Decay palette, but then I saw this online and I was like, oh shit, this is, I think it's new for them to carry LORAC, and I had seen Lauren May Beauty do a video on this and it looked, well, I'd seen this palette online and then I saw Lauren's video and I thought that it looked super beautiful, and it was $45. I felt like that was quite fair, and so I just decided to get it, and this was more intriguing to me than any Urban Decay palette, honestly, and I'm just gonna try it out today. I've never tried LORAC shadows before in my life, ever, and I have swatched some of the shimmers and they look actually very beautiful, so I'm looking forward to it. I would say, like, right out the gate, there's a lot of light mattes that I'm not loving, but that's all right. If it looks a little bit weird, I did accidentally drop it. It wasn't a huge disaster, but some of the shades aren't looking like perfect. So I'm going to scoot to the side and do some swatches. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but the last time I did my swatches are, you know, not always 100% amazing, especially when I do them on camera. I try. I don't have a viewfinder. I look at like my little screen from like a mirror that's propped up behind me on my ring light. So most of the time it's just like a hope and a prayer that I'm in frame and focus and all that shit. So if something doesn't look right or out of focus and I don't know it, that's why. Anyway, let's just do some swatches of this bad boy. Let's play with it a little bit. Okay, so the first shade is the shade Birch, which is a like light peachy matte. Not exciting to me. Then we have the shade Oak, which is like a light neutral brown. And then the shade Earth, which is an even lighter neutral brown. Yeah, so not the most exciting shades to start with. Then we have the shade Rosewood, which is a like light matte mauve shade, and then the shade Mushroom, which is a neutral brown, and then the shade Fog, which is a cool toned brown, almost leaning gray. I do like the tones, but I wish that there was a little bit more depth in this palette. I will say that. Then we have the shimmers now. So this first shimmer is called North Star, which is a pretty light champagne, I guess. And it's pretty sheer but really sparkly. It's pretty close to my skin tone, so you might not be able to see it super great. And then the shade, whoa, Como Rebi. Hold on, let me look up how to pronounce that. But this is like a light, also champagne shade that's a little bit deeper and has like more gold to it. These swatches are not all gonna fit on this arm, I'm gonna tell you that right now. Como Rebi. Como Rebi. I think I actually pronounced it right. It's a, what is it? the Japanese expression for the sunlight as it filters through the trees. Oh, that's so nice. And then we have the shade Enchanted, which is a like bronze. I think that is so pretty. There's a ton of sparkle in these shades, which I really appreciate, but it's not like too much. It's not like overly glittery. My candle is being very loud, but it's sparkly, so that's very nice. Then there's the shade Butterfly, which is a pink with a gold shift. Again, very sparkly. Then the shade Wind, which is beautiful. I mean, this is like a neutral, like almost taupey shimmer with like green sparkle to it. It's so nice. And then we have a matte at the end of this row, which is called Redwood. This is just a warm toned matte, like brown, warm toned brown. Then for the last row, we have the shade Folklore, which is another shimmery champagne. This one is also pretty sparkly, very similar to the Como Rebby shade, but this one isn't quite as sparkly. And then we have the shade Pine, which is more of a metallic. It's a less like sheer sparkly shade, more of just like a traditional metallic. It's like a warm toned bronzy shade. I'm gonna scoot over to just finish this. Then we have the shade Grove, which is another bronzy shade, one that's again just more metallic than sparkly. The shade Wildflower, which is a deeper bronze with like a purpley tone to it. It looks like pretty purpley reddish almost when you see it in the palette, but on the swatch it looks like kind of like a deeper bronze with like a purple undertone. Then we have the shade Evergreen, which is a deep metallic green, like emerald green. And then the last shade in the palette is the shade Woodland, which is another brown matte. That is, I guess it's pretty neutral. It has maybe a hint of warmth to it. And this is the palette all swatched out. Definitely a neutral color story. I mean, you know that going into it when you look at the palette, but I'm not mad at it. I've been kind of into neutrals more recently, and I think the shimmers look really nice, and it honestly just looks like a really nice neutral palette. So let's zoom in. Let me scoot my chair down. Okay, hello, it's Laura from the future. Just coming in to pop in here. Anyway, I'm popping in to say, number one, this is at the point where I will include up-close swatches of this palette. Number two, I always forget to say this, but my up-close swatches, like individual swatches that I've recently started doing, are 100% inspired by Lauren Mae Beauty. I just want to give credit where credit is due. I will link her video on this palette up in the cards, and I'll link her channel down below. And I also do want to mention that the pans in this palette are removable and magnetic, so you can pop them out of the palette and move them around with your singles if you want. If you pop this palette up like this, which I actually didn't realize you could do before, but if you pop it up like this, you can see there are little holes in the back, and you can just pop the shadows out and yeah, use them as singles, which I think is so nice. And I know a lot of people are into doing that, and I think it's really, really great, and a thing that I just didn't know and didn't mention until I read the back of the box. Now, I just want to read the description that LORAC gives on the back of this box, because truly they are selling the fantasy of this palette. And just like close your eyes, listen to the sultry tones of my voice describing this palette, because I think it's one of the best palette descriptions that I've ever read. Excuse the garbage truck outside, okay? But they said, but the back of this palette says, reinvented with professional makeup artists. This enchanting palette contains 18 nature-inspired shades which, together, create a captivating look sure to capture the breathtaking sensation of sun rays peeking through the evergreens. From rustic sequoias to ethereal bronzes and deep clays, these universally flattering shades, which I don't necessarily know that all of these shades are universally flattering, but anyway, are enriched by every skin tone. Okay, I don't know what that means actually, but glisten like the luster of morning dew with ultra glimmery shimmers, experience the wildflowers sway with foiled metallics, or soak into a lush meadow with buttery mattes. These ultra pigmented shadows are as good for the skin as they are gorgeous. Vitamin E, cucumber extract, and shea butter, blah, 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 blah. But isn't that like, I just felt the fantasy of this palette with this description, and I just wanted to share that in this insert. Okay, now let's get into the up close swatches of this palette. not gonna lie, I think I have to use this shade. What is it called? Wind. I gotta use it today. But I'm going to start with, I'm gonna start with this shade called Oak, which is just like a neutral brown, as most of these shades are. I'm just gonna tap out any creases. I primed with my NARS Smudge Proof Eyeshadow Base, as I always do. But I actually have started to not set my primer, and it's been working pretty good for me, so I'm gonna do it today. And if it's a disaster, well, that's gonna be too bad for everyone. Okay. So I'm just going to run this shade through my crease, just as a little transition shade. I feel like I'm living my like 2015 dreams, because I coveted, well, I didn't covet, I lusted after the LORAC like Pro palettes so much, but they really weren't that easy to get in Canada, and I never ended up getting it. I actually got one for a friend for her birthday, and I had to use like a courier like shipping service or whatever to ship it to me, and I was like, should I just keep this for myself? But I ended up giving it to her. So I never actually have used LORAC eyeshadows before. I mean, this is actually building up quite nicely for how light that it looks in the pan. I mean, it's still light brown, but it's building on itself really well. And this is a palette that I could see myself realistically using this or reaching for this a good amount. Now I'm going to take the shade called Fog and just run this through my outer corner of my crease. I just want to see how much I can actually get this to build up. And I think most people who watch me know that my #1 complaint about this palette is that it doesn't have enough depth. Too many light mattes, far too many light mattes. So I was able to get this built up pretty well. I think this is like, but I definitely did have to sit here and build it. Like, I had to go in again and again and again, but it does build on itself. So that is always a plus, especially when a matte is this light. And then I'm going to take the shade Woodland, which is this neutrally brown. Well, it's actually not really neutral. I would say it actually is probably warmer, but anyway. I'm going to use this to build up depth in my crease. And why do I feel like this is not going to work how I want it to? I feel like they could have gotten rid of #1, a lot of these like light beigey shades, and #2 maybe taken out one of these like 3 champagne shades that are all pretty similar, and then done like a dark gray or like a really deep dark neutral brown. I think like mattes, I think that would have rounded this palette out really well. And then you could go light, even if you had just one of those shades as a transition shade or a light shade or whatever, and then you have the option of going dark, because I think some of these metallics like are deeper, you know, so you can do smoky or you could go light. But alas, this will be the hill that I die on. And these matte shades are pretty powdery. Like when I put my brush in, I'm not being aggressive or anything, but there's definitely like a good amount of kick out. Okay, those aren't even at all. Okay, hold on. I'm just gonna take the brush that I had the shade Fog on and blend this out a little bit. So again, it did build up pretty well, but I'm always just here for going as deep as is possible. So, and then I'm just gonna go in with a clean brush and go over the very edges. And they're blending well. Like in terms of matte performance, aside from my critique of the color choices. They're like, I couldn't really want more from how these mattes are performing, which is honestly a pleasant surprise. I'm not, like, I had pretty much no expectations for this palette. I know Lauren said that she liked it. I don't think I've seen anyone else's review of this, so I'm kind of just going off of like what she said in terms of what I know other people feel about this palette, but I had like pretty non-existent expectations and it's going well. Now I'm going to take the shade Wind because I can't not do that, and just going to take this all over my lid here. I'm going to give that a little spray and put this basically everywhere. The love that I have for a metallic taupe is like almost unparalleled. I don't know why I love them so much, but like I have such a passion for them. I mean, that's a good metallic. It has sparkle, but it's not like, doesn't make your lid look textured. It applied well. No complaints from me, honestly. So I'm going to take Fog and just run that over the front of my crease. And then take Woodland and do the same thing, keeping the depth. And then I'm going to take Woodland and build my outer corner up a little bit more. Okay, my camera needed a little break, so I let them take it. Now I'm back. I'm going to, I don't have much to do for the rest of my eyes, to be honest. I'm just going to take the shade Oak, which is the transition shade I used, and just buff this over the edges of my shadow as I typically do. Then I'm going to take Wind on my finger. It almost has like a greeniness to it. It's a really pretty shade. And then just intensify this on my lid. Look at that beauty. And then I'm going to actually take the shade Earth, which is this light beige here. And I'm going to see how this works as a brow bone highlight. This is kind of the only way that I could actually see myself using it. It works. It's not very bright, but I guess it works. This is probably the one shade in the palette that I don't really see myself using at all, to be honest. And then, yeah, so I'm just going to do my lower lash line now. I think I'm just going to do it all the same. So I'm going to take Fog, which is that like neutral, or cool toned rather, browny gray. I guess alternatively, this could be called a taupe. I think that's actually how you would describe this shade. And just run this all along my lower lash line as I usually do. I'm going to take Woodland and put this under my eyes to deepen my lower lash line. And then I'm going to take Oak and just blend everything out. I'm going to use North Star, which is this lovely little bright champagne-y shade. Maybe it's like lighter than a champagne. It almost looks like a pinkiness to it. I'm gonna, I sprayed that a little bit just so it sticks a bit better. I'm gonna just put that in my inner corner. That's really nice and bright. And then lastly, just to add another shade in here, I'm gonna take the shade Evergreen, which is this green, and put this right as a pop on my lower lash line. Alright, and before I go, I'm just going to take a black eyeshadow. This is my Pat McGrath Single Black in the shade Dark Matter. I'm just going to put this in my inner, or my outer corner, because I can't do an eyeshadow look without doing this. So. Okay, and now this is for real the end, so I'm going to hop off camera, do my everything, the rest of my face, do my hair, because it's looking a hot mess right now, and then give you my final thoughts. Okay, so this is my finished look. I really enjoy this palette, or have enjoyed it so far. On my lips, I'm using the ColourPop Ultra Matte Lip in the shade Chi, and my lashes are just random ones from Amazon. I just did a winged liner, and everything else is on my face will be in the description box. So My thoughts, oops, whoa. My thoughts overall on this little palette, I actually am super pleasantly surprised. I think at the end of the day, what you see is what you get with this. You're gonna have a neutral crease no matter what, unless you obviously use another palette, but we're talking about this one. With like a pop of like shimmer on the lid, and I think they perform well. Like the mattes blended really nicely actually. They built well. They didn't get patchy when I layered them. And I think like that's mostly what you can ask from a matte shadow, if I'm being honest. Color choice aside, okay? And the metallics, well, I used one all over my lid. This green shade, I didn't really use, that much of it. But it, again, is like really, really pretty. It has sparkle, but it's like, I feel like a universally loved sparkle, if I do say so myself. It's not like Cleona level, it's not JD Glow level, it's not incredibly textured, like super intense sparkle, but it's nice, it's sparkly, and I feel like for the average person, it's like relatively wearable and it's not super intense, but it does, catch the light really nicely, and it's really, really pretty. Overall, I'm like super happy with this palette. I think it gives you exactly what you want it to give you, It's a neutral palette with some really pretty shimmers, and I think I'm happier with this than I ever would be with any Urban Decay palette, to be honest. The shadows are a little bit powdery, the mattes are a little bit powdery, so if that's something that's going to bother you, like if you're really bothered by powdery mattes, don't go near this palette. And the shadows are a little smaller, like it's a pretty compact palette, but I kind of like that about it. I don't know, it's like a very little sleek little palette. No frills. I mean, I think that's standard with LORAC, like they're not over the top in terms of packaging or how anything looks, but that could be a plus to you. It's like you could put this in a lot of places. Like, what? Oh my god. But that could also be appealing, like you can just slide this into your bag, you can bring this wherever you need to go, or it's not going to take up like a ton of room where you store your makeup. I don't know. I feel very strongly that this is a palette that people will like if they don't wear a lot of makeup, but also if you do wear a lot of makeup and you kind of want just an easy throw on neutral palette, this would please you as well. I mean, this palette for me is not 100% ideal because all of these shades, or most of these shades, I would use as transition shades. Like I liked that I could build this like gray shade up so that it was like a pretty good like crease shade for me, but in an ideal world I would have deeper mattes 100% across the board, maybe even a black. I feel like that could fit the vibes of this palette. But yeah, like overall, if you're looking for a neutral palette or a new palette to add to your collection and you're not a color wearer that is, it's under $50, at least under $50 Canadian, and performs well, this is a palette that you won't have to think about using, throw a shade on in your crease, put something on your lid. It's really nice, it's very user-friendly and easy to use. So overall, this was a pleasant experience. I can do a 3 looks 1 palette with this. I might still, if that's something that anyone would be interested in. I try to do 3 looks 1 palettes with all the new palettes that I, bring in, get some use out of them, but if that's not something that anyone would be interested in seeing, then I won't I won't bore you with that content. Let me know if this palette is intriguing to you, or if you've picked this up and what you think of it. It kind of was like a little pleasant surprise for me. So I had a ton of fun using this, and I'm obsessed with a neutral grungy smoky eye. I think that this would be like my everyday look if I didn't wear color as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you've made it this far, let me know if there's anything else that you would like to see from me in the future, and I will leave you now. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye. I don't know why I said thank you instead of bye.